YTPC, good afternoon. Buckeye Piper coming at you. Much improved day. Rain is gone, sun is out. Feels great, feels great. So, reminds me of a nice spring day in Ohio, even though I'm not in Ohio right now. So, I thought this would be the greatest time, or a great time to kick off my new series, even though I'm not quite done with my Cadre Blend series. And this new series is going to be growing up in the 80s. The things that experiences, things we did. Man, it's windy out here. Pipes are really smoking. Before we get cooking on that, I'll show you my Nording Seagull. This is the one Nording Mrs. Buckeye Piper does not care for. I picked this one out, of course. She doesn't like it. You'll have that. And in it, we're smoking some Howl O' the Wind by Rat Trade. So it's my first go with this blend. It's a Virginia, and it's Kentucky, Virginia, and Perique combined, pressed into flakes and hand rubbed. So first impressions, very good. You know, I really enjoy the Virginia blends, especially you throw in some Perique. The Kentucky, we'll see. I have a couple Diet Dr. Pepper again as my drink of choice usually for this, and actually doing a little nip of monkey shoulder this afternoon. Scotch, if you haven't had it, fantastic. We didn't have that in the 80s. Well, we might have, but I didn't have it in the 80s. But what to kick off that 80s series, just talk about life growing up in central Ohio. That's where I'm from, just outside of Columbus. Small town. Not even 1,000 people. 63 people in my graduating class, and that was the biggest class in years. Went to school there, kindergarten through 12th grade, and to this day still amazing friends with almost everybody that I went to school with. Still in touch with them. Grew up with them, obviously. And so a lot of this series will center around, you know, without using names, my friends, what life was like before we had all this technology and everything else to keep us distracted. But, you know, in the 80s, you know, as I think back to that, my first bike, and I'll never forget picking it out, I went with my grandpa. And all my bikes came from department stores, right? And I can't remember the name of this department store, but it had a big wagon wheel out front. It was kind of modeled after a general store. I don't think it was a national brand, but it was in Lancaster, Ohio. But I picked out my first bike. It was a Schwinn Mark II. Had the banana seat, was red and yellow, kind of blended into orange. Just loved it. So that was my first bike. That was my own. I guess my first bike, technically, I got from my aunt. She gave me an older bike that had training wheels. It was probably one of my cousin's bikes. And I outgrew that very fast. So I got my own Schwinn. Rode that for a few years, probably until I was about 10 or 11. And then it was time to upgrade. That's when the BMX era was really hitting. And you don't, you know, at least I don't see or hear much about BMX anymore. But it was a BMX style bike. I can't remember the brand. It came from Kmart, I'm 100% sure. So we always shopped Kmart back in those days. But it had the cool pad that went across, you know, the frame. and the pad that went across the handlebars. And you know, I thought I was king on that bike. Really learned a lot about, I'll call it BMX. I was never a BMX rider, but we had fun. You know, learning how to do pitch outs, bunny hops, tabletops, stallions, endos, and all that crazy stuff on the bike. Thought I was the king of the world when I learned how to do a pitch out into a mud puddle and splash somebody. If you're not familiar with that, that's when you kind of just, you're riding and you just throw your back tire out. Usually you did it to hit a mud puddle or to kick a can at somebody, or if you didn't pick up your back tire all the way and just scooted it, you could fling some rocks at them too. That was always fun. Bunny hop, obviously, you just hopping like a bunny, both wheels off at the same time. You know, stallions, when you got your front end up and then you basically hopped your back tire up. Tabletop, I never really could do that. That's what you did off a jump. It's when you basically, they'd still do it in motocross racing, but when you see them do that big jump and they lay the bike down kind of sideways, it's pretty cool. Now the endo, I busted my butt on that quite a few times learning that. I don't know what we were thinking doing that, but that's when you were riding your bike and you basically would stick your foot between the tire and the frame and kind of like do a makeshift what a front brake would do, and it would lift your back tire off the ground. So obviously if you were going a little too fast or not careful, it would really fling you. You'd go for a ride. So mastering that was fun. Of course, we jumped everything. We'd take cinder blocks out and wood out of the garage, and man, we would jump everything. You know, one particular day I remember I made a big jump and wrecked it and just skidded across the gravel. It just was burnt all the way down my chest and legs, and good thing Godzilla was on that day at cartoons. I was able to go in and get cleaned up and calm down. We had a bike shop in town, and that was all the rage back in the 80s, probably the mid 80s, when I was in that BMX craze, early 80s. You know, and I would just go in there and spend hours. They had the Diamondbacks and the GTs, the Mongoose, the Red Lines, just bike after bike. Hutch was a big bike. Remember when one of the kids in town got a Hutch? It was $1,000 bike back in the 80s. You know, extremely expensive. There was no way I was getting one of those. So I stuck with my Kmart BMX bike, you know, and I put a lot of things on it from that bike shop. I put on the mushroom handle grips and a little racing plate with 17 on it. You know, we did at one point have a BMX track in town. They built it in an open field and used it for different sporting events and festivals and things like that. It was a pretty legit track. You'd start out pretty straight drop down, have some jumps, have some big corners you could corner, have some of the whoop-de-doos or whatever they're called. It was, I mean, as close to legit as we were going to get in the 80s in a small town in Ohio. Spent a lot of time on that track, just a lot of time, and loved it. Back in those days, we rode our bikes everywhere. Fishing, I remember riding my bike. We'd carry our poles, our tackle box, everything. Ride to school in the mornings when it was nice. If we could be out on our bike, we would be out on our bike. Always out on our bike. And I alluded to it in one of my videos yesterday. There was always 10 or 12 of us or more just tearing through town. we had a couple really nice hills. And man, when you hit those hills, you get cooking down those hills. That's a term I haven't used since those days, cooking. We're cooking it and we're booking it were the terms that we used. We'd be cooking down those hills, man. Just flying. And, you know, really from where I lived up into the town, up into town, which was, you know, a one stoplight, one little restaurant, one post office. Actually, we had 2 gas stations, one pharmacy, kind of that stuff. That was town. It was about a mile. So we would just book it from my house. My friends lived about halfway in between my house and uptown. We were all over all summer long. You know, we'd stop in at the ice cream factories, have an ice cream, just tearing up the town. You know, what's sad about that is you just don't see kids, and I guess it's sad for me, probably not sad for the kids. They don't know any different. You don't see that now. Occasionally I'll see a kid on a bike. It's been a while since I've seen anybody on a bike. Certainly not 10 or 12 or 15 of us. And there'd be days where it was that many of us. Riding to the pool. I mean, wherever we had to go, we rode. I mean, even long rides. For us back then, long was probably 3-4 miles one way. But we'd do it. Heck, I wish we'd have known how many miles a day we put on those bikes back in the day. We were just up and down those roads from just after lunch usually until the street lights came on. No helmets, no knee pads, shoulder pads, elbow pads. We wiped out quite a bit too. Get back up, get on your bike. It would suck when your chain blew out. Everybody would be taken off and you'd sit back there trying to get your doggone chain put back on. Everybody else would leave you. You'd have to figure out where the hell they went. They're gone. So you'd be chasing them up and down the roads, riding even harder, booking it even more. Man. Picked up a small gurgle. What a time to be alive, you know. And I remember my grandparents saying stuff like that, and my parents, like, I wouldn't want to be a kid nowadays when I was a kid. And I look back now and I can see what they're talking about. I guess that's probably true for every generation. I would not want to grow up in this generation. I mean, we had enough problems to deal with school and with bullies and stuff like that. And you know, I was never a bully. I was never bullied. You know, I was kind of just ran with my crowd. It was a small school, like I said. But man, the way they cyberbully each other, and they just nasty to each other, just terrible. So you know, we had Atari 2600 and we had Nintendo when I was probably early junior high. That didn't keep us inside. We were outside kids. We lived outside. You know, after I grew out of the BMX era, probably 85, 86, 87, right before I got my license in 88, was the 10-speed era. Most of us traded in our BMX bikes for a 10-speed. Same stuff, booking it up and down the hills. You know, I remember riding that 10-speed to go bale hay down to my friend's house. It was about 1.5 miles from my house. Yeah, you ride down in the morning, take your lunch and everything, pack it up with you, your water, and you go bale some hay for the day, and you ride home that afternoon. That'd kill me if I tried to do that today. But that's what we did. You know, that's kind of like the walk to school uphill both ways stories that our parents told us. That is a true story, though. Ride your bike to football practice, to two-a-days, the pool again, anywhere you would need to go. And that lasted until, like I said, until I got my license. But man, I think back to those times, and it's just a lot of the conversations we had, the growing up we did. You know, those were priceless, absolutely priceless. As I mentioned earlier, I'm still friends with almost all of those guys that I tore around town with bikes on. We'll reminisce every now and then, but I thought this growing up in the 80s would give me a chance to kind of reminisce, and maybe you all can settle down and grab a pipe. I probably should have said that before I started my story. Can't really tell how long I've gone. I'm getting a little long-winded at 16 minutes, so I'll probably wrap this up. Thanks for watching and going down memory lane with me. Love to hear your experiences around bicycles in the 80s. I'm still working on my draft for some other 80s stuff that I hope to talk about, and just life growing up and how it's changed. You know, again, I've sat outside here for 16 minutes on a beautiful day. It's in the 70s now, sunny and a little windy. I haven't seen a single kid go past, and it just wasn't like that growing up in the small town I grew up in. We'd have already been past 10, 12 times. But anyhow, thanks for watching. I do want to show one other thing. You know, I'm sneaking little things into my videos for the GAW I've got coming up at 250. So I'm over 210 now, which thank you all. Very humbled to be picking up subscribers. But I wanted to show you what Mrs. Buckeye made for me today. Buckeye Piper. Of course, that has to be hand washed. Can't go in the microwave, can't go in the dishwasher. But for my GAW, whoever wins will get their own custom made mug just like that. Of course, it won't have Buckeye Piper on it. It'll have your channel name, your handle. But it's one of the extras that we're throwing into this GAW. So. Well, folks, I'm going to sit back, finish this bowl of Hallow the Wind, finish a little bit of that monkey shoulder, maybe watch a few videos, and then I think I'm going to take Mrs. Buckeye Piper out on the town and hit the Red Lobster. Thanks for watching. I appreciate you. Be safe out there. Be blessed. We'll catch you later, YTPC.